Summary of Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Van Dyck Van Jennings states that the following events are based on his own recollections, as he lost his journals and photographs from Herland. Van says that he will do his best to describe the country without his old notes because everyone needs to know what life is like there. Van says that the real adventure starts when he, Terry O'Nicholson, and Jeff Margrave go on a journey that has nothing to do with Herland. Their guide tells them that there is a mysterious country hidden in the wilderness that is made up of only women and their girls, with no men or boys. However, all the local men who have tried to find the country have disappeared without a trace. The guide takes them to a river where red and blue dye has been found. The guide says that the dye comes from the land of women. Terry, who wants to go on an adventure and is intrigued by the idea of a country full of women, tells Van and Jeff that they should go back to America, get ready for a long journey, and then go back to the area to find the mystery women. Jeff thinks that a country full of women sounds like a utopia, and Van wants to study the history of an all-female society because he finds it interesting. Both of them agree with Terry's plan. When the men get back to America, Terry, who is very rich, makes plans for a plane and motorboat to take them back to the unknown jungle where Herland is said to be. The men find the river of dye and follow it as far as they can before they have to get out of the boat and get ready to fly over the mountains. Terry knows how to fly, so he takes himself, Van, and Jeff over the mountains in his plane. From above, the men can see miles of woods, towns with good infrastructure, and even people. The plane is landed by Terry, and the men do their best to hide it in the forest. As the guys get ready to walk around the country, they talk about what they've seen so far. They think that since the towns are so well built, there must be guys somewhere, even if they live in a different part of the country. At the moment, the only people men could see from the sky were women. The three guys carefully look at each tree as they walk through the forest. Jeff and Terry notice that every tree is growing either fruit or nuts, and that the land has been carefully tended to produce as much food as it can without being overworked. In fact, the forest is more like a big yard than a wild place. The men are still cautious because they think there must be men ready to use violence to protect all the women if they need to. As they walk through the bush, Terry hears muffled laughter coming from somewhere nearby. When the men look around, they see three people looking at them from the branches of a big tree. The guys carefully start to climb the tree and stop when they are close enough to the women to talk to them. Terry says his name and then points to Jeff and Van and says their names. One of the other women does the same thing. She says her name is Elidor and that the other two women with her are Alima and Silas. The women won't let the guys get any closer, so Terry shows Alima a colorful necklace. Van figures out that Terry's plan is to grab Alima as soon as she gets close to the necklace. However, Terry's plan fails when Alima grabs the necklace and drops out of the tree before Terry can grab her. The women run away and can't be caught for a while. Using their binoculars, the men see the women enter the city nearest to them, so they start going in that direction. When they get to the city, they see that it is well kept and clean. Before they get very far, though, a group of middle-aged women that Terry calls the colonels surrounds them. Jeff, Van, and Terry follow the women to a big gray building. The men are scared, so they decide to fight back and run away instead of being taken prisoner. It doesn't take long for them to lose, but Terry fires his gun twice and one of the women screams as he does so. Terry, Jeff, and Van fall asleep when the colonels put rags with anesthetic on their faces. When they wake up, they are in a big room with cozy beds. They get up and look around the room together. They find a bathroom with all of their toiletries and a closet full of clothes from Herland, but none of their own. Before trying to find a way out of their room, the guys decide to clean up and get ready. To the men's surprise, the clothes are very comfy and have many pockets. They are made up of a one-piece undergarment, tights, and knee-length tunics. After getting dressed, they go to the only door in the room that is locked and knock on it. When you open the door, you walk into a big eating room with tables, chairs, and sofas. There is a lot of food, and there are 18 women waiting for them. each guy sits at his own table next to a middle-aged woman, who gives him a book that seems to be meant to teach the men the Herlandian language and the women English. Over the next few weeks, the women who gave Jeff, Van, and Terry their books will teach them something new every day. Summel, Modine, and Zava are all teachers who teach the guys about the history, religion, and society of Herland. The men are also asked to teach the boys about life outside of Herland. But after a few weeks, Terry gets bored and insists on trying to get away. One night, the men use their clothes and bedsheets to make a long rope that they use to climb out of their window and over the yard wall. After spending several days moving at night and sleeping during the day, the men find their plane. But it is wrapped with a tough cloth that they can't cut without knives. A short distance away, Alima, Silas, and Elidor suddenly appear, laughing as they watch the guys try to tear the cloth. Van and Terry try to get the women to give them a knife so they can fly their plane away. They have learned some of the Herlandian language. Alima, Silas, and Elidor don't let the guys take their knives. Instead, they say no and run away when they try to grab them. When the colonels show up, they lead the guys back to the fort. The men are surprised that they are treated like truant children instead of being punished for running away. Their teachers tell them that they can meet everyone in the country if they learn the language and agree not to hurt anyone. With this in mind, the guys decide to give their lessons another try. Van, Jeff, and Terry find out in bits and pieces that there haven't been any men in Herland for more than 2,000 years. Before that, the country had many men, an army, a king, and access to the sea. But wars, a volcanic eruption that cut the country off from the rest of the world, and a slave revolt killed all the men in the country. The women were left behind and had to rebuild the towns on their own. After 10 years of working to fix up the land and grow crops on it, one woman got pregnant for no apparent reason. She started out with one daughter and then had 4 more over time. The whole town took care of these girls and loved them. When the girls got older, they each had 5 children of their own. For the next 2,000 years, this trend held true. Motherhood became a holy calling, and every woman looked forward to having a baby. This made the women want to improve their society in ways that would last for generations. But they soon understood that they had to stop the growth of the population or there would be too many people to feed. After farming every inch of their land, the ancient Herlandians decided that the country could support about 3 million people. This meant that from then on, each woman could only have 1 child. However, some women, called overmothers, were allowed to have a second child. The Herlandians learned to avoid getting pregnant by putting all of their physical and mental energy into work as soon as they start to feel excited, which is a sign that their bodies are trying to make a baby. When a baby is born, everyone in the community works together to teach and care for the child. This way of making babies is called parthenogenesis or virgin birth, and it only makes girls, never boys. The women create a faith based on parenting and work constantly to improve their society so that it will last for hundreds of years. Jeff, Van, and Terry tell their teachers about life in the rest of the world, especially in the United States, in exchange for knowledge about Herland. The women always take notes, and the men find out later that they also keep files with information about things they don't want to talk about. Men are often ashamed to talk about how things are in America because they are often worse than in Herland, where there are no wars, poor people, or diseases. Summel, Zeva, and Modine are very interested in how American women live, especially after hearing from the men that women are kept at home and expected to raise children while men do all the public work. Soon, Jeff, Terry, and Van will be asked to go all over the country to talk to groups of girls and young women about world history and culture. Jeff, Van, and Terry see Silas, Alima, and Elidor again while traveling across the country. Soon, they start dating. Jeff worships Silas, Terry falls deeply in love with Alima, even though they fight a lot, and Van's friendship with Elidor slowly turns into a deep romantic love. But it's hard to date Herlandian women because there are no rules about how men and women should act, and the women have never felt sexual desire, so they don't understand why men do. In the end, all 3 couples get married, but marriage turns out to be even harder than dating. Elidor doesn't understand why Van wants to have sex and says that she can only do it when she thinks it's helpful, like when they're trying to make a baby. At first, this makes Van mad, but he agrees to wait until she's ready. Silas and Jeff do, however, have sexual relations, and Silas becomes the first woman in Herland to get pregnant by a guy in 2,000 years. Terry gets mad at Alima because she won't start a sexual relationship with him. He hides in her room one night and tries to rape her because he thinks that if he does, she will give in to his wants. But Alima fights back and calls for help. Terry is taken prisoner, and the women decide that Terry must leave Herland for good. Van and Elidor decide to go back to the United States with Terry so Elidor can see more of the world. All three of them promise not to say where Herland is until, and if Elidor comes back with a full report of what life is like outside of their quiet country.
About the author. Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born in Hartford, Connecticut, on July 3, 1860. When Charlotte was very young, her father, Frederick Beecher Perkins, left her, her mother, and her older brother. She was able to go to school only sometimes, and she spent most of her free time at the neighborhood library. At age 24, Charlotte married Charles Walter Stetson. The following year, they had their only child, Catherine Beecher Stetson. Charlotte fell into an intense depression after Catherine was born. She was given the well-known rest cure, which later inspired her famous short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. Charlotte took the unusual step of leaving her husband, and they were finally divorced in 1894. She went to Pasadena, California, and there Charlotte got active in the fight for women's rights, which you can see in many of her stories. Charlotte moved back east after living in Pasadena for a few years. She met her cousin Houghton Gilman, and in 1900, the two of them got married. They never had kids, and Houghton died suddenly in 1922. Gilman went back to Pasadena, where her daughter was living after Houghton died. Gilman kept writing until 1935 when a doctor told her she had breast cancer that could not be cured. Charlotte was sad and didn't want to go through the pain that late-stage cancer would cause, so she decided to kill herself a few months later, on August 17, 1935.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.